All right, and check a setting real quick. And it looks like we are live. Awesome. Hey everybody, this is Ian with Writing Launch. Welcome to today's webinar. I'll give everybody a minute or two to filter in, but I just wanted to start by saying welcome. I'm glad you decided to take some time out of your day to spend with me today, and hopefully I think you'll get a lot out of this webinar. One thing I do want to mention, if you're a regular viewer of ours, you'll be excited to know that I'm going to do something a little different today, and we also have a sneak peek of an announcement that we're going to be sharing today, which I'm very excited for. We're going to tell everyone publicly about this later, but we wanted to give just all of you watching a first glance at this new surprise we have in store. So if you want to know about that, definitely stick around until the end. And I'll also, as usual, be answering questions. So if throughout the webinar, if you have any questions on any of the material or anything that I didn't cover, feel free to ask in the comments. And then at the end, we'll get to as many as we can. And of course, if your question doesn't get answered due to time constraints or what have you, you can always email us at support@writinglaunch.com. That's support@writinglaunch.com. And we'll get to all the emails as best as we can in the time that we can. So without further ado, let's jump right into the webinar. I'll transition to the slides in a minute, but I kind of want to first explain what the purpose of this webinar today is. As you saw, the title is How to Grow a Freelance Career from Scratch. And so in this webinar, I'm going to not only be talking about the beginner steps, but I'm really going to be talking about, the first few years that you'll experience as a freelance writer. And so if you've been wondering, what is this, what is freelance writing actually going to look like for me for the first, 1, 2, 3 years, then this is going to be a really eye-opening webinar for you. And I really hope you enjoy it. I'm excited for this one. So let me transition over into the slides, and then we'll start everything. All right, so the title for today is, like I said, how to grow a successful freelance writing career from scratch. And that from scratch is important because I'll talk about this a little later, but one thing that I always say is that, of course, you don't need any experience to get started. And that's very true still. I'll address that in more depth later, but if that's what's been stopping you, I just want to reiterate that you don't need to be worried about that. And you might have questions about that, but don't worry, we'll get to that in due time. So let's get started. First things first, freelance writing is a business. And that has a lot of implications for how you do things as a freelance writer. And the reason that I'm opening with this is that I think it's the most misunderstood part of freelance writing. And it's something that when you start out, you don't really think about. To give you an idea, when I started as a freelance writer, I didn't really understand this until maybe 4 years into it, three or four, I would say. And that really hurt my business, because I was a one-person business, but I wasn't treating it like a business. And that doesn't mean I was making, these cold sales decisions or what have you. I just wasn't optimizing myself. I wasn't setting myself up for success. And that's what I want to talk about today in relation to how freelance writers as business people can help others. And that's kind of what I'm going to get to as the crux of freelance writing. Simply put, running a good business means knowing what your clients want. And this is very important. If you've watched any of our videos in the past, you know that I talk all the time about value. And value is the most important component of a good freelance writing career. And it's what you want to focus on if you really want to succeed, especially if you want to freelance write long term. If this is what you want to do for a career, or if this is what you want to, make a lot of your money from, then this is definitely what you want to focus on, is how you can provide value. And that means knowing what the people you work with need and catering to those needs. And again, the reason that I'm starting with this is that I know it sounds a little advanced. It doesn't sound like something you would normally associate with just starting out, but it really, really is important. Now, now that we've gotten that out of the way and sort of created that baseline of value, let's talk about what you need to start a freelance career. The first and foremost thing you need is a passion for helping people. And again, this is one of those things where it sounds very simple. It sounds like it should be a given, but it's one of those things that a lot of freelancers don't think about, for whatever reason. And for a long time, I didn't really think this way because I misunderstood the role of a freelance writer. And I'll get to that later on in the webinar. But ultimately, to be a freelance writer, you want to be able to have a really driven passion for helping people, because I've been a freelance writing for about 6-7 years now. This is one of the best ways to help people, especially in a digital age, especially in a time where so many people are working online, especially with now the pandemic going on and so many businesses and entrepreneurs turning to online business. Freelance writing is one of the best ways to help people as a business, and ultimately that is the crux of freelance writing and business as a whole. And I'm talking about good business. Obviously there are some corporations that don't think about this, but when it comes to kind of just what we do as writers, this is what we should focus on. And if you do, then you'll almost set yourself up for a guaranteed career. Not always. I mean, there's other work you have to put in, and like I said, I'll get to that. But this is the foundation on which everything else has to be built. You also need the willingness to learn, which again is something that I think it doesn't get talked about a lot. But as freelance writers, as craftspeople, really, we need to constantly want to improve our craft. And I'm always learning. I'm continually learning. Last week or earlier this week, maybe I forget exactly when, but I was learning some grammar, some really niche grammar rules that I hadn't learned before. Learning different things, and I'm always improving and always looking to improve. And that's one of the most important parts of being a freelance writer, is just wanting to continually improve and then actively seeking out that improvement and furthering your education. You also need self-motivation, and this is important too because, I know it can be hard to motivate yourself, especially if you are plagued with things like anxiety and just drive issues and self-doubt. And I totally get that, and I've experienced all of those, and I still do. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to have that drive. And again, this goes back to that passion for helping people. You want to be able to have that drive that will carry you through all of those insecurities and low moments and really catapult you to a better place. You also need both short-term and long-term plans. And again, this is a really important part that not a lot of writers think about because, when you start out, it's so new, it's so unusual because it's not like freelance writing is a mainstream career choice, It is still something that not a lot of people, all things considered, choose to pursue. And what that means is we often overlook a lot of the aspects that we would if we were in other careers. If you got an office job, for instance, you would have kind of, short-term and long-term ideas of where you would be in that business. So these are the kinds of plans that you want to think about, and thinking about the long term is especially important. I can't stress that enough. And again, we'll talk about that a little later. But this is everything you need to start a freelance career. And notice that I didn't say experience. And this is a big question we always get is, I don't have a portfolio. I don't have experience. How can I start if I don't have experience? And, that question is simply answered by putting yourself out there and looking for the right jobs. And again, I'll cover that in the webinar today. But as long as you're looking for the right jobs and as long as you're positioning yourself correctly, you don't have to worry in the beginning about not having experience. You really don't. And now let's talk about finding your first jobs. And this is one of the most daunting aspects of freelance writing as a whole. It really is. And I remember when I was looking for my first few jobs, it was just a nightmare. I was very anxious about it. I was trying so many different things and it seemed like nothing was working. And so what follows in this webinar is just my hard-earned knowledge about how to get those first few jobs. The most important thing is to look in the right places. And this is hands down the most important part, because if you're not looking in the right places, you're not going to be getting the right jobs. And if you're not getting the right jobs, then you're not going to, be happy. It's not going to be sustainable, all those things. And I'll talk about where the right places are in a minute, but for now, I just want to really impress that upon you, is that, if you're looking for jobs and you're finding jobs that you just don't like, jobs that you don't want to take, then you're looking at the wrong places. And it takes time to find the right places, but it is so worth it. And this is one step where I see so many writers give up. And I really wish that they would push through and look at better places, better job boards or what have you, because it's really, really one of the first big hurdles that you will face, but one that can be so easily overcome once you get that momentum going. So for starters, you want to avoid websites that post low-paying jobs. And, you'll have to kind of calculate how much you need as a writer to make however much money you need. But if the job is if it's just too low paying, you shouldn't take it. And again, it feels weird especially as a beginner, because you feel like you almost have to take whatever job you can get. And that's simply not true. I was talking recently with someone about this, but as the freelance writer, you're the one in charge. You're the one who's getting to decide who you work with, that's one aspect of freelance writing that I feel so many people overlook, is they get so worried about finding jobs that they forget to, kind of realize, I'm the one picking the jobs. Like, you get to choose which specific clients you get to work with and how much you get paid and all that. And, you are, for all intents and purposes, the boss, and your clients are kind of working with you and not above you. And I think once you realize that really unlocks that dynamic of, okay, I can choose what jobs I need. And again, that's sort of a mindset thing, but I just wanted to throw that in there real quick because it's one of the most important just lessons about freelance writing that I can probably give you. And when you start, you, of course, want to look for opportunities that have a low barrier to entry. I've had so many people, come to me and say, I have no experience, but I want to pitch the New York Times, or I want to write for, this place or that place. And that's just this huge goal that is pretty impossible to accomplish. And then when they can't accomplish that goal, they feel demotivated. So you do need realistic expectations when you start out, but you also just want to, be mindful of where you are and don't let that stop you from looking for jobs. Just because you're not going to immediately get your dream job, that doesn't mean that you should just kind of, give up altogether. And so again, I really, really want to encourage you to, during this phase, really stick it out. And I know, it feels sometimes like you're just treading water. It feels like you're not getting anywhere. But I promise you, if you stick it through, you'll find success. And yeah, it can just take a while to find these jobs. And the important thing is to not give up. I'm going to be talking about consistency later today. But for now, I just want to impress upon you, when you start out, just don't give up. Take the time to let things happen and to, look for different jobs, to see what works, to see what doesn't, to just find your way. And like I mentioned earlier, don't worry about not having a portfolio, because the majority of the people that you're going to work with, ultimately, they don't care about experience. The reason that they want experience, and the reason, traditionally employers have looked for experience, is because they want someone who knows what they're doing. And experience is just an easy metric by which to measure that. But if you can if you can persuade them that you're the person for the job, if you can say, hey, I can write well, I can deliver results, I can deliver value, that's all they need. I mean, that's the proof that they need, because that's what they're looking for ultimately. That's experience is just a means to an end for them. And again, I think this is something that stymies a lot of beginner freelancers, as they think, oh, I have no experience, I can't do it. But really, at the end of the day, experience is just a means to an end. So if you can just jump to that end and say, hey, I've got what you need, and persuade them, then that's all you need to do. And I've talked about that a little bit more in depth in some of our other webinars, and I, of course, talk about that a lot in our courses. So maybe check one of those out if you're interested in learning more about this topic. And when you're doing this, you really want to focus on your strengths and draw attention to your value. I see a lot of writers who are starting out, and they feel for some reason obligated to point out that they don't have any experience. And it's not relevant, because you're only you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot by saying that, because then if you create that sense of doubt, then the client or the editor might go, oh, okay, I don't know about this person. But if you focus on your strengths and really focus on delivering value to the person or the business, then that is going to be what will ultimately get you jobs. Now, this is something that a lot of writers choose to do. I think it's a great way to get started, and it's a great way to make a living, but it's very approachable for new freelance writers, and so that's why I want to talk about it here, and that is writing for publications. And publications being a catch-all term for any sort of magazine or newsletter or any sort of regular published material. And this is a great way to get started because it has such a low barrier of entry. Like, a lot of blogs don't require you to have experience or, be in a certain location. You can write from anywhere in the world. You can write at any skill level. They just want good content. And so a great way to start, if you have nothing, I'm talking about if you have no portfolio, if you have no published work, no real writing experience even, but you just know how to, and you can write well, then look for publications in your niche that ask for pitches. And this is important because you really don't want to find publications that just want articles, and some do ask for the entire article, because what that means is if you go through the process of writing, a long article and then they decline it, you're now sitting with an article that you can't use, because most of the time when you write an article for a publication, it will be for that publication only, and it won't make sense for any other publication. So if they reject it, then you're kind of stuck. So if you just find publications that ask for pitches, you're going to be much better off, and you'll save a lot of time. And pitching is really easy to learn. It's something, again, we have an entire 4-week course devoted to pitching. It's taught many of our members just, how to pitch easily and successfully. And, it's one of those things where the more you do it, the better you get at it. And, if you can get over those initial few bad pitches, you'll be set. It's really, really a lot easier than it seems. And we have a webinar on this on our channel. If you want to go look at that, we have videos on that. And like I said, we have an entire course on that. And there's a lot of information out there about it. It's one of those things that feels intimidating, but if you can just get over that initial mindset of, oh, I'm scared to do this, if you can just do it once, everything else will follow. And freelancing in this way is really going to help you get off the ground. This is how I got my portfolio started. I had, no real experience. I was an English and writing major, but that didn't, have any analog in the real world. I had essays, but I didn't have anything published. And the way I got published was finding these types of blogs that didn't, require someone with 5 years of copywriting experience or, 10 years of SEO or whatever. And that's how I got started. And I've seen it work for so many members. And I think it'll work for you too if this is something that interests you. And I really think it's the single easiest way to get started. So keep that in mind as we go forward, because this is a good first step, and maybe this is the stepping stone that you need to get started. Now, to help you with this, we have a couple bonuses that we're going to be delivering to you via email, so be on the lookout for those. But the first is our paid publishing guidebook. I always say, every time we give this away, I always say that this is the resource I wish I had had, and I'm going to keep saying it until we stop giving it away, because this is just a magnificent resource. It's over 1,500 publishers that pay writers, an incredible amount of publishers. When I started out, I had to look for every publication by just searching for them, and I could find lists, but I didn't have anything like this. And if I had, it would have really saved me some time. And I was actually talking to a member yesterday, and he said that he got his first article published because he found a good publication in this guidebook. So, if you need any proof, if it works, there it is. And I'm really excited to be sending this to you. So again, look for that in your inbox. But then, of course, when we talk about publications, we have to think about not only looking for the publication, but also pitching. And that's why we're going to give you a second bonus, which is the new road-tested pitch template. The road-tested pitch template is a template that I came up with a few years ago, and it was based off all of my successful pitches. Essentially, what I did was I looked at all of my pitches that had gotten accepted, and I thought, okay, where is the common thread running through all of these? And I made a template based on kind of everything that was working. And since then, I took a second look at it, and especially as I've gotten, just better as a freelance writer, I've made some changes to the way I pitch, and so this reflects those changes. And this is a really effective template. If you use this, you will get a lot more yeses than you will nos, and it will hopefully boost your success rate. And it's really short. You might be surprised at how short it is, but I really implore you to give it a try. Change it up for your own voice, your own style. But I really think if you try this out, you'll be surprised at the results. So again, keep a lookout for that in your email inbox over the next couple days. Now, another thing I need to say at this point is that you should avoid content mills and freelancing platforms at all costs. This is something that I see so much. And, I started out on a freelancing platform and I know how it is, but this is one of the things that makes me the saddest about freelance writing as a whole, is because, like many other careers, freelance writing has become commoditized. And it's become a commodity, and that means that so many people are willing to do it for, next to no money. And a lot of places just want to churn out content, hence content mills. But even freelancing platforms, these places that give you the appearance of being, a sort of on your own freelancer when you still use a middleman, that platform is still taking a cut of your hard-earned money. You don't really get to choose the people you work with. And if you do, you're kind of, scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to clientele. All of that just makes for a horrible situation. And I see so many writers who think that this is what being a freelance writer is. And I think if only they knew, I've gotten to do so many cool jobs as a freelance writer. And if I had stayed on a freelancing platform, I never would have gotten those jobs. I really wouldn't have. And so I just want to take a minute to really impress upon you that even if you can't find any other jobs, finding no jobs is honestly it's better than going with this, because you make so many compromises and sacrifices and you have no upward trajectory as a freelancer. If you get on a content mill or a platform, then there's nowhere to go from there. You have to take the initiative to self-start and say, okay, I need to start making my own way, striking out on my own. And if you don't do that, then unfortunately, you'll more than likely be stuck. I see so many people just fall into ruts and depressive periods because they're stuck on these platforms. But I really just want to implore you to avoid these at all costs. And I'm talking, Upwork, Fiverr, Textbroker, all these places. They sound great and it seems like they offer a lot, but they are way worse than they seem, and they really stop you from growing as a freelance writer. So I hope that you will take the initiative to cross out all of these from your list of options and find publications that pay well, find clients that pay well, find people that you like working with and stick with that. And again, this is one of the big takeaways that I want you to take away from this webinar, because I know so many of you are even on these platforms and mills right now. If you are, I understand it's hard to go off, especially if you are making money this way, but I promise if you take the information I'll share with you today, if you look for jobs that suit you, that are in your niche, that are much better paying and that are more independent for you, then you'll have a much better time as a freelance writer. Now, we've covered a lot of the basic information, and usually this is where I kind of stop the webinar. I go into a lot of depth about how to get started, but today I want to talk about how do you get to that next level, because starting is the hardest part, I think, but getting to the next level can be just as hard, especially if you don't have a roadmap going forward. So the question is, let's say you have gotten a few articles under your belt. You have a small portfolio together, and you have a little bit of experience now. How do you go from that initial point of just getting jobs to making more money, to establishing yourself as a freelance writer, to getting the kind of jobs that you want to have, that you really are passionate about, getting those jobs where you get to help people, one-on-one or, with a small group of people? How do you get to that level? In other words, how do you turn freelancing into a career? And again, I'm assuming many of you want to do this as a career. Even if you want to do this as a side career, it still applies. All of this information still applies. The question still stands, how do you do it? How do you make that jump? One of the most important steps in making that jump is defining your goals. When I started out, I didn't really have goals. My goals were basically, I want to pay rent for the month. And it can be so easy to get in that trap of thinking in the short term, especially when you're starting out, especially when you're struggling. But it can't stop you from thinking about the long term, because if you don't think about the long term, and if you don't think about what specific goals you have, then you're lost. You don't know which way is up when it comes to freelancing. And it's really one of the things that you should be doing as early as possible. And you want to be specific here. You want to create goals that you can easily track and measure. If your goals are vague, that's very bad, because then you can't know if you have succeeded or not. If you say, I want to be a full-time writer. Well, what does full-time mean for you? What kind of implications does that have? How much money does that mean you're making? How much time are you putting in? How many projects per week are you doing? Those kinds of specific questions are the ones you need to be asking yourself. Questions like, how much money do you need to make? How much time can you dedicate to writing? What do you want to be working on? Who do you want to be working with? How do you want to position yourself as a writer? Again, the more easily that you can track your goals, the easier it will be to achieve them. So, I see, and I've had conversations with members and writers who have goals, but they're kind of vague. You know what I mean? Like I want to be published or something like that. And that's not really a helpful goal, because it doesn't propel you forward. If you can say, for instance, and this is just one example, I want to be making $2,000 a month writing for local businesses, and I want to do that in 9 months. That is a very specific goal that you can easily track, and you can easily make sure, you can easily see if you've succeeded or not succeeded at that goal. And again, like I said, you want to think about the long term, and this is so important. Again, when you start out, it almost feels unnatural to think about the long term, especially because, and I think this is something that it traps a lot of freelancers, is that freelance writing seems kind of like quicksand. You know what I mean? It seems so uncertain, because when you're just struggling to pay rent, when you're struggling to pay your bills, how can you think about the long term? You need to think about just getting the next paycheck, getting the next job, getting, food on the table. And I understand that, and I've been there. I've been through some really low times where I really didn't know how I would get the next job, times where I had to borrow a lot of money from my parents. Those were growing pains that I experienced. But had I given up then, I would have had to just settle. I would have had to choose a new career, basically. But since I stuck it out, I had that ability to pivot into the long term. And if I had thought about the long term back then, I guarantee you I would have done better. And that kind of short-sightedness where you're only focused on the next job, the next paycheck, that can dramatically harm a budding writing career. You need to be aware of that stuff. Like, obviously you can't just, be cavalier and say, okay, I don't need to worry about getting jobs right now. Of course you have to think short-term, but you have to think about long-term in addition. And if you are too short-sighted, then that can prevent you from, knowing the way forward. It's sort of like if you're walking down a path, but you only look at your feet, you can't see where you're going. Now, in connection to that, here are some questions that you might want to ask yourself once you get to this point. Questions to help you suss out your long-term plans and goals. For example, how can I consistently deliver value and results? What does that mean for me and my clients? Because this is going to vary from niche to niche, right? It's going to be different depending on your situation. And this is why I can't really give answers here. I can only present the questions and you have to answer those yourself, So what does value mean for you and your clients? What kind of results do you need to provide? How can you consistently do that? How can you become someone's number one problem solver? This is really important. If you want to have, and this is especially true if you want to work with clients, if you want to work with businesses and people on a kind of a one-to-one basis, this is something you really need to think about. Because if you can become someone's number one problem solver, and what I mean by that is, when, let's say you create a good working relationship with somebody, a client of yours, when they hear writing or content, if they immediately think of you, if they get if maybe they need something done and they immediately go to you, that is incredible. That is so important, because that means that you are their number one problem solver. That means that you are their go-to person for anything regarding what it is that you do. You know what I mean? And a good example of this is, let's say you have someone who cuts your hair and you have been going to them for years and years and years. And they do a good job and you are very happy with the work and you keep going back to them because you just trust them. It's the same sort of relationship with you and clients. If you can be that person with a client, if you can be their number one problem solver, the person that they think of when they hear the word writing or content, or when they get a new writing job in that they need done, or content that they need done, then you will have a very successful career, because that means that you can create those connections with people and keep them coming back to you. This one's a little, there's a lot to unpack here, but I just want to put this out there. How can I find sustainable long-term writing jobs that will provide a steady income? What types of jobs like that exist in my niche, and how can I get them? Again, there's a lot to unpack here, and I realize that, but it's an important, these are important questions to ask, and I wanted to put it out there to get you to think about. Where do I want to be in 1 year, in 5 years, maybe even 10 if you want to think really ahead. And again, you should think about the short term as well. You should know where you want to be in a month, in 6 months. But, you want to keep an eye on the long term as well, because that is just so important. And like I mentioned, that analogy of walking with your head down is very accurate, and I felt that way for a long time. I knew that this was what I wanted to do. I always knew that, I kind of, it just always felt like I couldn't do anything else, and I kind of just fell into it. So it seemed very right for me, but it was so uncertain for so long. And had I thought about the long term, I would have been able to think about just the aim of my career and the trajectory that I would go through. And I guarantee you that I would have done better. But thankfully, since I learned those lessons the hard way, I'm now able to teach you those lessons without you having to go through the same stuff that I did. Now let's talk about an important aspect of writing, which is the grind. And this is earlier I said we were going to talk about consistency. That's where we're going to arrive at right now, because consistency is key. And here's the thing, and I'll talk for a minute about mindset because I think this is so important. And again, I realize that maybe a lot of the stuff I'm saying sounds kind of broad. It sounds kind of, not vague, but just general. But if you can apply this to your own career, you will see how much of a difference it makes. You will really see those results happen almost immediately. So let's talk about consistency. Now, a lot of writers, like I mentioned, feel, anxious or they doubt themselves, and they have all these kind of self-imposed blocks that kind of stop them from being consistent. They have that inner voice that says, oh, you shouldn't be consistent because your work sucks or whatever. That dialogue ultimately crushes you, and it leads you to believe that you're a failure. However, the only difference between success and failure is consistency. And of course, I'm talking about freelance writing specifically. I'm sure this applies to many other things in life, but especially when it comes to freelance writing. I struggled for a long time as a freelance writer, but the reason that I'm successful today is because I pushed through all those failures. I kept going. I didn't let that stop me. I kept looking for jobs. I kept writing. I kept doing everything that I needed to do. And so many writers, and understandably so, but so many writers give up when they encounter these big failures. They think, oh, I'm no good. They think, oh, I can't do it. They have that inner voice and they give up. But if they were to push through those failures, they would see that, through that failure, that's where success comes from. And again, that sounds kind of cliche. I realize that, but it's very, very true. If you can be consistent, you will find yourself succeeding. And again, this is especially true with freelance writing because it's one of those things where you have to do it over and over again. It's not like you're going to fall into a long-term job that gives you a lot of money. That's not going to happen for 99.9% of people. But that does not mean that you can't make a good living as a freelance writer. That doesn't mean you can't do it. And that doesn't mean that your writing is bad, You need to just be consistent, trust the process, lean into it, keep going, and, build up that grit. And that's a quality that a lot of entrepreneurs talk about. If you, listen to any business kind of podcast or whatever, you'll hear a lot about grit. And it's one of those kind of buzzwordy terms, but I think it really does apply here because you need that sort of attitude where you're like, okay, I'm going to just grind through this. I'm going to stick it out and, and keep working at it. And sooner or later, I'll find what works. And that's the kind of attitude that you want to have. And again, this takes time. I don't like to sugarcoat things. I want to be as honest and as transparent as possible. And, it took me a few years to get to a stable point where, I was making a regular income as a freelance writer. Now, I did do a lot of things that prevented myself from succeeding. Like I mentioned earlier, I started on a freelancing platform, and, that took, I think I probably wasted 6 months-ish on the platform, maybe more like a year, but the effects of that lasted for, 2-3 years afterward, because once I had accepted those parameters, I carried those with me, and it took me so long to even raise my rates past like 2 cents per word, and it was just horrible. And I wish that I had gone back and looked for better jobs and charged more, and I wish that I had done so much different. But again, I'm glad that I learned these lessons because, now I can teach them to you. But yeah, it takes time. And something that I want to point out is don't change approaches the minute something doesn't work. And again, I see a lot of freelance writers doing this. If something doesn't work, they'll try something once. And if it doesn't work, then they'll say, okay, I'm trying something else. But if they were to stick it out just a little longer, give it some time, they would realize that it might give them results. So when you approach something, whether that's finding jobs or, working with a client, give it some time. If something isn't working right away, don't immediately abandon it. Give it some time, and then if it's still not giving you any results, then make changes, then pivot your approach. And again, even through this process, you'll likely find most often that the problem will take care of itself. You'll find out what works just by going through the process of sticking it out and going through it when it doesn't work at first. Another thing that I mentioned earlier, and one thing that I really want to cover, is the role of a content writer. And again, I think this is one of the issues that prevents freelance writers from succeeding. Because especially if you're coming over from creative writing, which I know is a lot of you, you have a preconceived notion of what a writer is. And I think we tend to give very almost spiritual connotations to writing. And I think that is very appropriate. And I think writing is definitely a medium for that. But when it comes to being a freelance writer, a content writer, there are different expectations for you. And I think you need to be aware of those, because I think they are as good as, if not better than, writing for your own sake. And again, there are just different types of writing, different expectations for each type of writing. And so what I want to go over now is just the expectations and just sort of the ideal role that a content writer should embody. The overall gist of it is that your mission should be to provide helpful, valuable content. And like I said in the beginning, I truly believe that being a freelance writer is probably the best way to help people as a business. If you want to affect other people, if you want to help other people succeed, if that is one of your passions in life, then being a freelance writer is a fantastic way to do that. I've made so many good connections over the years, and it's been so cool to see the people I've helped succeed. It's very rewarding. And I think, again, some people, when they hear, writing for business, they have all these connotations of like, I have to write ads or, greasy sales copy or whatever. And it doesn't have to be like that. But we do need to talk about what this means to provide helpful and valuable content. This is maybe a hard pill to swallow, but it's really something I need to point out, and something that delineates content writing and freelance writing from other types of writing. Writing content is not about sharing a personal message. It's about helping others. And I think this is something that, again, flummoxes a lot of writers, especially people coming over from creative writing. They assume that it's the same. And again, there are different types of writing. There are different contexts in which we write. And when it comes to freelance writing, when you're doing this as a job, your goal is to provide value to others and to help others. And if you can share a personal message in doing that, that's great. And there are some situations where you want to do that. But for the most part, it's about your clients. It's not about you. And this is one thing that I see so many writers, it's a trap that I see so many writers falling into, because they think, okay, writing is a vehicle for my self-expression. And I think that's true of creative writing. But again, this is what delineates creative writing from freelance writing. Now, one of the questions that creates is, how can you provide value to the clients and editors that you work with? What does that mean? And again, this is going to vary from niche to niche, from client to client. But a general answer is that you want to create content that will help them achieve their goals. And again, this is contextual. You will have to figure out what this means for yourself. We talk about this a little bit in some of our courses, and in the announcement that I'm going to be making later, there will be more information about this topic. I'll just say that for now, but I hope you stay tuned for that. But yeah, this is just a general statement, a general answer to this question. Another question that you might think of is, well, how can you write the best possible content to help the most people? When it comes to really helping others, to really affecting other people, to improving their lives, how can you best do that? And again, a general answer that you'll have to extrapolate for your own niche and your own situation is to curate and present valuable information that will improve your readers' lives. That's really it. A lot of writing is curation. A lot of writing is actually more curation than creation. And when you curate and present all this information, you give people a resource that is very trustworthy, that is very reliable. And that's what a lot of people want. So if you can keep that in mind, you will set yourself up for success in terms of being able to help other people and being able to just, write really valuable content. Now, at this point, I'm very excited because this is the sneak peek that we're going to be giving you. This is something we've been working on for the last few months now, and we wanted to unveil this to just all of you watching today. We're going to announce this publicly later on, but as sort of a thank you for supporting us and just a little exclusive sneak peek for sticking with us, we wanted to give you a little peek at this. We've been hard at work on something, and if you've seen any of our materials, you know that we have a main course called the No BS course on freelance writing. It's our flagship course. It's geared at beginners and people who are maybe just seeking information about learning how to freelance write. And something that I've always kind of wanted is a course that not only covers those basics, but goes into more depth because, I've been writing, like I said, for about 6-7 years, and there is so much that I've learned in that time. And the No BS course, even though it's 6 weeks long, it can only go over so much. And I realized that we needed a course that covered those more advanced, nuanced topics. And so that's what we created. And what we have done is made a sequel to the No BS course, which we're tentatively calling Part 2. We might, change that name at some point, but it is a sequel to the No BS course on freelance writing. It's a Part 2 that addresses more advanced information. Now, if you're not familiar with the No BS course, I'll give you a short intro to it. It's basically a 6-week course on all of the tools and resources that you need to get started as a freelance writer. It's the one, I think if you took any one of our courses, it should be this one. It covers so much ground from, setting rates to, how to write content to how to look for jobs and much, much more. And it's 6 weeks of really in-depth instruction. And this is a long course. It's a lot of information to take in, but it's based on just all the years that years of experience that I've gone through. And of course, if you're interested in this, you can sign up for free right now. We are offering a free month of tuition for everybody listening because, and this is something we've been doing for a while now because of the pandemic. And we want to make sure that we can just help as many people as possible. And, we don't believe that, especially when times are tough, we don't believe that there should be barriers to high barriers to this sort of education. If you want to keep supporting us and keep being a member, we would love nothing more than to have you. But of course, if you just want to take that free month, you are more than welcome to sign up right now. And I definitely encourage you to take that course if you haven't. But that course does, like I said, it covers how to get started, but it doesn't cover that advanced information. Like I said in the webinar today, how do you get to that next level? And that's what Part 2 answers. Part 2 is an advanced guide to really building a freelance writing career. If this is what you want to do for a living, or if this is something you want to do as a regular side job, then this is the course that you need to take. And it is over 20 lessons jam-packed with expert knowledge. And I don't want to give too much away. I just want to give you a little sneak peek of it. But we have essentially 3 sections. One is devoted to career, one is devoted to the craft of writing, and the third is devoted to cash or finances. And all of those 3 pillars are things that you need to address as a freelance writer, especially if you are thinking about doing this, full-time or as a regular side gig. And so I'm very excited to share this course with you. And you will be the first to know when it launches, especially, if you sign up for the free month. You will have kind of dibs on when it launches, and we'll give you all that information later. But for now, we just wanted to give you a little sneak peek of it because, like I said, we've been working on this for the past few months, and I'm just so excited. I think that this course is going to help so many of you get to the next level and really take control of your career. And I think that's something that a lot of freelancers struggle with. I think especially, certainly when I started out, I felt for a long time like I didn't have control. Like I had to play by other people's rules, that I had to sort of, just take whatever I could get. But the more I've learned, the more I realize that freelance writing is just, it really is one of the best jobs in the world. It's one of the most freeing jobs. And I just love doing it. I love helping people this way. And so this part 2 is going to really help you achieve that. It's going to give you all the tools you need to take your career to the next level. And again, I'm not going to give too much information about that, but I hope you are all excited for that. And, definitely let us know what you think in the comments. But yeah, that's just a little sneak peek for now. So to wrap things up, I just want to do a short Q&A session. I hope that this has been a helpful webinar. I know I haven't covered everything. It's tough to cover everything in detail with just an hour of time. But if you have any questions, I'll try to get as many as possible. And again, if I don't get to your question and you still have something, or maybe you're watching this later and you have a question, be sure to email us at support@writinglaunch.com. And let me transition back to my camera here. All right. And there we go. So yeah, that was the webinar proper. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll try to get to as many questions as I can. But like I said, if I don't get to it, support@writinglaunch.com is our email. And, even if you just have any questions in general, or you just need to, talk about a problem you're facing, or you just want advice, feel free to email us. We're trying to get back to you as soon as possible. We sometimes get influx of emails, and sometimes, things slip through the cracks, but we are trying as best as we can to answer as many questions as possible. So let me take a look through the questions right now. All right. Let's see. We have a question. About niche. Okay. Are you going to talk about establishing a niche at all? Well, that's something I have covered in previous webinars, and we actually have a video on that on our channel. It's really just kind of self-explanatory. When you are starting out thinking about a niche, you want to go with something I always say is you want to make sure it's a balance of passion and profitability. So of course you need to pick something that you can make, a living from, or at least make some money from, because that's certainly an aspect of it. But you also want to pick something that you are passionate about. You don't have to pick something that you are necessarily, an expert in, because not everything requires you to be, an extreme expert in the topic. Even if you're, maybe a hobbyist in something, you can write about that. You can write from your own perspective. And it just takes some time. And I think one of the reasons that I don't really talk about niche is because it's so dependent on the writer, and the process that you go through to arrive at a niche, or even just, a handful of niches that you work with, is so individualized that it's hard to give general advice. So I hope that explains why I haven't, really gone into detail on it. But we do have some videos on our channel that go into a little more depth and provides a little more suggestions in that arena. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. We have a question. This is a good question. What's the best way to word a pitch if you do not have a portfolio? Keep a lookout for the new road-tested pitch template, and that will take care of it for you. I promise you. If you use that template, even if you just use it as it is, I would really recommend changing it up to fit your style, because a little customization goes a long way. And, if you can adapt it to be in your own voice, it will do so much better for you. But even if you just, filled in the blanks like a Mad Lib, like a pitching Mad Libs, it will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So definitely keep an eye out for that. This is another good question. What is the difference between those job boards and the freelancing platforms? I had Writer's Work opened in another tab when I opened the webinar. Well, Jonah, I hope you closed it out. I really do, because I know you can do way better than that. Well, it's a big difference, and I see, and here's the tricky thing, is that a lot of these platforms and a lot of these content modes, they want to come off as very legitimate. They want to come off as, we're a good place to get work. But the reality is anything but, because a job board will list jobs that, people post, and that is not beholden to anybody. Like the company does not have any stake in it. But when you're going through a freelancing platform like Upwork, obviously the company wants people to take as many jobs as possible because it makes them more money, right? And so there's that incentive to really, be involved in that way. And of course, since the platform is taking a cut of your money, your hard-earned money, they can just kind of do whatever they want. And a job board, on the other hand, is much more neutral, I think is a good word to describe it, a little more objective. It's simply a repository of jobs and not, I guess a good way to put it is that it doesn't, a freelancing platform kind of holds your hand, and a job board, there's none of that. Like a freelancing platform, you can kind of guarantee that you'll get some jobs, but on a job board, you really have to put in a lot of the work. And that's another difference, is because like on job boards, especially on good job boards, the company is posting there, they want good stuff, and they have much higher standards than the types of companies that would be posting, and that's another thing. Most people that are posting on freelancing platforms and content mills, they're the kind of companies that you don't want to be working with. Like, I've had so many nightmare clients from freelancing platforms, and when you go onto a job board where it's much more neutral, these companies want just better quality of work. And so if you can provide that, that's just generally the kind of place you want to be looking for. But that is a great question. I'm very glad you asked that. Do you have any suggestions for finding good hotspots? I do. If you look in some of our previous webinars, that's something I've talked about briefly. If you can find good job boards, if you can avoid just platforms and mills and like a job boards that are more neutral, like I was saying, you'll have a much better chance for success. But I do go into more detail on that in our previous webinars. So if you want to check those out, I highly recommend doing that. Here's a good question, one that I can answer from experience. This is really basic, but can you start a freelance writing career even if you are very young? Will anyone accept your pitches? Again, you see, I think this is one thing, like I was saying earlier with experience, where a lot of writers, they use this ad hominem logic on themselves. They say, well, I don't have any experience, so I can't be a good writer. Well, you know how to write, don't you? You have something to say. You have the ability to help people. That's all you need. I started freelance writing when I was, I think, 20. And, at that point, I had maybe a couple years of college under my belt, but I didn't really know what I was doing, especially not for the first few years. And I kind of felt that way, because I know there are all these, 23-year-old millionaires or whatever, but I was not one. I was nowhere near a millionaire, and I still am not. But I was worried that, my just lack of experience would, and lack of age, would stop me from getting jobs. But I mean, it just didn't. And that's because, pretty soon I learned how to present myself. And this is why in the webinar today, I said, hey, focus on value, focus on delivering value, because if you can focus on that, that is all you need. And again, I get a lot of writers, they shoot themselves in the foot. They say, oh, I don't have experience, I don't have this or that. It's like, none of that matters. It really doesn't. And I really hope this is something that you can take away from this and apply this in your own career. I'm going to say it one more time, but I really hope it resonates with you. If you can provide value to the people you work with, if you can help other people and deliver results for them, and if you can persuade them that you can do that, if you can assure them that you're going to be able to do that, that's all you need to do. You don't need to worry about having a portfolio. You don't need to worry about being published in certain, respected publications or whatever. You don't need to worry about having certain types of jobs. That's all you need. And I promise, if that's what's been stopping you, please, please, please give it a try. Just give it a try. And again, it doesn't matter if you fail. And I think this is something that a lot of writers, especially creative writers, are scared of, is failure. Well, guess what? Ultimately, it's not on you, it's on them, right? If someone decides to not work with you, it just means that you have to find someone else. It doesn't mean that you are, a failure as a writer. And I think that's something that so many people need to hear. And again, in the new course, the part 2 of the No BS course that we're doing, there's a lot of mindset stuff in there, because mindset it really, really changes how you look at freelance writing. And if you can adapt the right mindset, you can accomplish so many more of your goals than you ever thought. So let me try to I think I can get maybe 2 more questions. And so let's go for 2 more. Here's a good question from Kathy, who asks, where do you find the best pictures to use if you're putting pictures in articles? This varies depending on the publication, because most of the time that you won't need to put pictures in articles. If you do, most of the time you want to go with royalty-free image websites. The one I use a lot is Pixabay. It's Pixabay. And it's a great site for finding royalty-free images. There's also Unsplash, which is really good. I think Shutterstock is, I think, paid, so I don't see a lot of people using that. But yeah, Pixabay and Unsplash are two of my favorites whenever I need royalty-free images. And actually, all of the images that you saw today in the webinar came from Pixabay, so it's really high-quality stuff, and it's completely free. So let me get one more question in, and again, if you have any more questions, feel free to email me. Here's a good question to end on from Bill, who asks, who owns the article you write? This is a very interesting aspect, and this is something I go into in the new course because, it really depends. There are different, depending on the client and the or the publication you work with, there can be different rules. Usually it's going to be the client or the publication that owns the article. Sometimes, if let's say you publish an article on a publication like an online magazine or something like that, what might happen is you will own the article, but they will have like the initial publication rights, so you could even potentially resell that article. I've never heard of anyone doing that, and I honestly don't think it makes a lot of sense to do that, but sometimes that will happen. And if you want to own the article, if you're working with a client, you need to stipulate that in the contract. But again, most of the time, it's actually not a big problem. I've only had one instance where that was a problem, and that was completely my own fault. But yeah, usually it's going to be the client or the publication. But again, in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter a whole lot. So yeah, that's a great question to end on. And again, it looks like our hour is up, so we will end it there for the day. But I hope you learned a lot. Like I said, I was really excited about this webinar. And this is the kind of stuff that I'm really, really, really passionate about. I like talking about, getting started and things like that. But just with my experience and what I've dealt with in the last few years and just how much I've grown as a writer, this stuff gets me really excited to talk about because I know it can help so many of you. So again, if you are excited for that new course that we have a sneak peek of, definitely make sure you're signed up for our emails, and definitely consider joining up for the free month. You can join right now at writinglaunch.com. I really hope you decide to do that. And again, send in questions if you have it. If you have any questions about the courses or about the new course or about the membership or the webinar, anything, again, support@writinglaunch is our email, and we answer all emails personally. So with all that said, we'll end it there, but I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you have a fantastic